بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. Continuing in our lessons on the Manzuma Al-Adab Al-Shar'iyyah Al-Sughra, the minor poem on the Islamic etiquette. The week before we stopped on line number 16, so we'll go from line 17 from the new chapter. Before continuing from there, there's a question that was asked by one of the brothers, which was in relation to the permissible forms of lying. And we said it's permissible for a person to lie in order to bring together two groups of people or two people who are in discord, who are disputing or who are separated. And the question was, can we take an oath by Allah's name when lying to rectify two parties? Yani, can someone say by Allah, or I swear by Allah that so-and-so has said such and such to come together? So we know we can lie to bring them together, but can we swear by Allah's name? So Shaykh Ibn Baz rahimahullah was asked this question in his Majmu' Fatawa, volume 1, page 54. And he says, if a person says in order to reconcile two people, or people, saying by Allah your companions want to reconcile, they want to come to an agreement, they want such and such, then he goes to the other and says something similar with the good intentions, aiming to bring about reconciliation, then there's no sin in that because the hadith cited above is proof. The same way he says similarly, if he sees someone who wants to kill another person unlawfully or to wrong him in some other way, and he says, by Allah, he is my brother. Now he's lying, but he's saying by Allah. In order to stop the other person from killing him, he says, the Shaykh, this is also allowed in order to save the person's life. And so from there we can see that while lying is permissible to bring them together, if someone swears by Allah's name in order to do so, the Shaykh says, inshallah, it's not harmful to do that. Okay, inshallah, we'll start from line number 17. With the author, he says, the chapter Adab al-Amr bil-Ma'ruf wa-Nahy 'an al-Munkar. Adab al-Amr bil-Ma'ruf wa-Nahy 'an al-Munkar. The chapter on the etiquette of enjoining the good and prohibiting the evil. So that will be a focus today. Today we'll do line 17 until 22. The author mentions more, but because of the time, we'll do this much. قال مؤلف رحمه الله وأمرك بالمعروف والنهي يا فتى عن المنكر جعل الفرض عين تسددي. Line 17, he says, you're enjoining the good and prohibiting the evil, O young man, consider it an individual obligation and you will be correct. So here the author, he begins telling us what's the hukum, the ruling on enjoining good and prohibiting evil. But in order to understand what he's saying, we have to read the second line after it so we can become clear. He said, line 18, على عالم بالحظر والفعل لم يقم سواه به مع أمن عدوان معتدي. Line 18, he says that it's considered an individual obligation and you will be correct upon the one knowledgeable about the evil. It's the first condition. He has to be knowledgeable about what's happening that's evil. And the action is not being performed by anyone else besides him. So he is very important. Number one, you have to know, you have to have knowledge that this is munkar. Number two, know what he's doing this, commanding the good and enjoying the evil, prohibiting the evil, except for you. Along with the last one, alongside there being safety from the oppression of the oppressor. Yani there's no repercussions that if what you do here, prohibiting someone, will not cause harm to you. Yani the adu, or the mu'tadi, the one who's oppressive, will not harm you. Then the author in line 17 and 18, he tells us now two rulings. And before we get into it, we have to first understand Amr al-Ma'ruf wa Nahy 'an al-Munkar. It's a very big chapter. Very, very, very big chapter. And truth be told, if we sat here alone just to talk about this, we would need lessons. Because it requires fiqh, and it requires hikmah, and a lot of shurut al-adab. A lot. So today, inshallah, we'll just mention that which we need to know, and some interesting things that we can keep in mind when we're doing this at home, and in public, or in the masjid, or in work. First thing, what is ma'ruf? When we say amr bil ma'ruf, what is ma'ruf? What does it mean by good here? So here, if we take a look at the ulama, our scholars, they mention many definitions. But if you combine everything they say, the following we learn. Ma'ruf is everything the legislation has commanded or recommended. Anything the legislation, anything the sharia, which is either wajib, or Allah has told you to do it, or mustahab, and it's recommended, or the person who does it, Allah praised them. Yani the sharia praises them. The legislation says so-and-so is doing good, or Allah says they're a good person, or they did good. So therefore, ma'ruf is anything the legislation commands, recommends, or the doer is praised. So that includes all ta'at, all obediences. And the head of them, tawheed wal iman. Tawheed and iman is the head of them. Because the first thing Allah commands is to worship Allah sincerely without any partners, etc. So ma'ruf, anything the legislation says to do, or recommends, or praises the one who does it. That's ma'ruf. Munkar, same thing but the opposite. Munkar, everything the legislation, the sharia says is haram, or detests, so it says don't do it, or declares it haram or prohibited, or the person who does it is considered madhmoom, praiseworthy. That's munkar. And entering into this is all disobedience, any form of ma'asiyah, wal bid'ah, kufr, shirk, etc. So the worst of the munkar is shirk. So now that we understand ma'ruf and munkar, we know from the legislation. But truth be told, does the aql know some share of the munkar and ma'ruf? Yes. Some things our intellect can tell us this is munkar, this is ma'ruf. But the sharia is the one that we put the reliance on. Because it's very important. Allah sent us sharia to tell us to clarify to us what is not only munkar and ma'ruf, but where is thawab and where is iqab. We have to understand that. So with that said, ma'ruf is not just ibadat, other things too. And therefore, the ma'ruf is all a comprehensive kind of term. Munkar, same thing. So now we know ma'ruf and munkar. And the ulama, when you check the definitions, they mention different things. If you put all together what they're saying, just goes around this idea. Okay, now the Shaykh, Ibn Abdul Qaadir, rahimahullah, he's telling us that enjoining the good and prohibiting the evil is obligatory. Wajib, either one of two ways. Fard kifaya or fard ayn. So fard means obligation, kifaya or ayn. Yani communal obligation or individual. So why does he divide it like this? Because the scholars, when they discuss the issue, you can't give a blanket ruling for commanding the good and prohibiting the evil. In fact, it changes situation to situation. It actually depends on the context. But we know, fil asl, if someone said in origin, what's the ruling? The majority of scholars, if not ijma' ulama, huwa fard kifaya. That's ijma' ulama. I'm going to mention the ijma', but what's the proof for the idea? Surah Al-Imran. Surah Al-Imran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and let there arise out of you a group of people inviting to good and prohibiting evil. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, let there arise from you. Minkum. Minkum means from you. Not all of you, some of you. And what are they doing? Ordering the good and prohibiting the evil. It's very clear. And so here, Surah Al-Imran, ayah 102, Allah is telling us here that this is a communal obligation because Allah didn't obligate everyone to do it. That's the asl, that's the original ruling. And therefore Imam Nawawi writes in Sharh Sahih Muslim that Amr Ma'ruf, that we command the good and we prohibit the evil, fi kulli zaman wa makan, in every place and time. Al-kibar wa sigar, for the older ones and the younger ones, or in big issues and small issues. And we don't humiliate or debase ourselves for anyone. And we don't fear the blame of anyone. And then the Shaykh continues, says, وَأَجْمَعُ عُلَمَا. The ulama have agreed. عَلَى أَنَّهُ فَرْض كِفَايَةً. That is fard kifaya. And then he mentioned the exception when it's not. And so the key is that the original ruling is fard kifaya, and then there's times when it's fard ayn, specific obligation. So we go with the asl. And why do we have to know that as the asl? Because if we don't know the asl, now you might think to yourself, I have to do this. No, you don't always have to do it. We have shurut, there's adab. And if you don't know them, they may going to cause a greater munkar than the one you're trying to change. A lot of times, when we look at the subject, you notice the ulama put so much effort in explaining this so that not everybody is going to engage in without having knowledge. Alright, so there we go, Surah We mentioned Shaykh Imam Nawawi's statement there, Sharh Sahih Muslim, and we also mentioned the ayah. That's the original ruling. وَلْتَكُمْ مِنْكُمْ أُمَّةٌ, let there be amongst you some ummah, يَدْعُونَ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ وَيَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Okay, with that being said now, the Shaykh, he tells us the ruling is then fard ayn for another group of people. And who are those people? It's a good question. When does it go from fard kifaya to fard ayn? Fard ayn means an individual obligation. He gives now 3 conditions. But obviously there's more, but we'll mention three reasons amongst many that can move the ruling from communal to individual. First one, nobody is doing it. So if you imagine there's a situation where no one's commanding good, no one's prohibiting evil, and you are able to do that, and you obviously know what you're doing, actually have knowledge of what is wrong and right, to that which much you're going to do, it's wajib on you, fard ayn on you then. That's one reason. Nobody's doing it, because Allah says, let there be amongst you a group. Which is very important, because we look at society today, the idea of commanding good and prohibiting evil has become very lost. It's weakening. And this is part of the akhir zaman, the end of times. And so we're going to get to later on, what do we do in today's time? Too much munkar. How are we going to prohibit all of it? But the idea is, no one is enjoining it. Example, in your home. If you're the only one who knows about salah, has to pray in jama'ah, and how to pray it, and no one is praying, you have to tell everybody to pray. You can't sit there and say, well, nobody's doing it. Because the responsibility is being left. And often at home, this is one of the good places to imagine the responsibility on your shoulders. No one knows it's haram, something in home, you know it. You have to find the means then to teach the people in your home. Second one, the person who is doing it has to be knowledgeable about the good or evil in question. And you have to have ilm. Not everything, but what you're doing. And qudra, ability to do it. So for example, if I have knowledge but I can't, because it's going to cause big problems or I'm going to get in trouble. We'll get to the third one. Then your ilm is you have to stop and don't do anything. It's very important. Fiqh is not just knowing, it's also understanding the consequences in the context. So the muallif, he said in line 18, ala alimi bil hadri. You have to have ilm. So you have to know that what you're doing. We'll get to later on how much knowledge do you need. But you have to know, this is bad, this is good. Because if you think it's bad but it's not bad, you can't do it. You got to find out first. The last one, there is no fear of repercussions on your life or your wealth. The ulama, they mentioned, what kind of repercussions can someone be afraid of? Imam Nawawi, I'll go back to the quote I quoted a few minutes ago. He says, فَمَنْ خَافَ مِنْ ذَلِكَ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ أَوْ مَالِهِ أَوْ عَلَى غَيْرِهِ. If he's scared, if he does what he's supposed to do, commanding good and forbidding evil, fear for his life, his wealth, or other than him, and his family. سَقَطَ إِنْكَارْ بِيَدِهِ. He doesn't have to make the inkar with his hand. وَوَجَبَتْ كَرَاهِيَةُ بِقَلْبِهِ. And he has to hate it with his heart. Very important. With this statement here, what he's teaching us, he says, هَذَا مَذْهَبُنَا وَمَذْهَبُ الجَّمَاهِيرِ. This is my madhab and the madhab of the majority. So what are some excuses and repercussions? Fear of yourself. Someone's going to kill you, beat you, take your money, harm your family. It's important because the one who's commanding good and prohibiting evil, he needs to think beyond himself. Because maybe he's strong, Allahumma barik. But then how about they go and they beat his family? He has to think. So the ulama, when they mention these, this shows you that when these situations, the person has to be in a situation, no one is doing the responsibility. He has knowledge about what is supposed to be done. That person is also capable of doing it. There is no fear of repercussions. It's obligatory. i.e. fard ayn, individual obligation. Lakin, we know when those conditions are not met, and the other things in consideration, then it's not fard ayn. And the reason why I have to keep mentioning this, some people are under an impression, I must prohibit evil all times, command good all times. The difficulty with this is that you may run the risk of making more problems, or you might end up losing yourself, your enthusiasm for the deen, because you're going to humiliate yourself. And we'll get to the examples later. If someone doesn't know this, he goes in front of a challenge too big. How about now, somebody can command the good, forbid the evil, they have knowledge, they're able, but they're afraid of backlash, and verbal abuse. Because today, everyone, if you command the good and prohibit evil, especially prohibit the evil, people are going to say bad things to you. This is the nature. So here, the ulama discussed, if someone will receive verbal abuse, insult, is that a sufficient excuse? They say it's not sufficient excuse. Right? So they say that verbal abuse and insult is not an excuse to leave off the obligation. Why? Because anytime you tell someone not to do something, they're going to say bad things to you. So you have to understand that from the beginning. وَاصْبِرْ عَلَى مَا أَصَابَكَ. Be patient in that which will come to you. This is what it's intended. And that's why Hafiz ibn Rajab in Jami' Ulum al-Hikam, page 151, and Ibn Muflih before him in Adab al-Shar'iyyah, he also mentions the same point. That when it comes to verbal abuse, it's not sufficient. At least the Hanbali scholars and others say that it's not really, because you can't escape that. And this is a big one for people online. Because people online, when they command the good and prohibit the evil, especially in our culture, you're going to receive backlash. Even if you post something which is not even attacking anyone. But you see the problem today, someone say, I don't want to see backlash. That you don't want to prohibit the evil. Because it's impossible. And added to this, people online also have to pay attention to these rules. Because this is where a lot of fitna and fasad happen. Somebody posts something, بدون hikmah wala ilm, and the whole world now is gone to fitna and chaos. Because you didn't choose your words properly, or even the audience. And we'll get to that later. You have to really be careful. And aware at least. طيب, with this being said, if other people are doing the work, and the person who is engaging in it is engaging alongside others who are doing it, and they have some knowledge now, then go back to original ruling, fard kifaya, communal obligation. With that all being said, can ordering the good and prohibiting evil become mustahab? Yes, sometimes it's mustahab and not wajib, or fard. It's mustahab only, recommended. An example the ulama mentioned of this is that when that which you're enjoining is recommended to begin with. So for example, I want to tell someone to do recommended deed. If it's recommended what you're telling them, it's recommended to tell them. Recommended to enjoy that which is recommended to enjoy. So for example, you want to tell everybody to pray the sunnah prayers. It's a recommendation. It's good then to do it. It's not fard on you to get up and tell everyone, guys, pray your recommended sunnah. Or sunnah ratib. Sunnah ratib it has fada'il, sunnah, so sunnah are recommended for you. That's the first thing. Or you're telling people to stop something which is makruh. It's not haram. That's mustahab only. So for example, people are doing something makruh. When you tell them don't do it because it's makruh, it's recommended for you to tell them. Not wajib. And not fard. Why? Because you're not telling them something haram. Haram we're talking, and what fard. So very important. The objective therefore when you're enjoying good, your first priority is the fara'id. Then the mustahabbat. And the second prohibition, you start with muharramat, then makruhat. A lot of times if you don't know, you make all the same. You're not going to have prioritized. And we're going to get to that. The person commanding the good and prohibiting evil must prioritize. It's very important because people can only listen so much to don't do and do. You have to be smart. Okay, what can I tell them today to do and maybe later not to do? So that's the first example, when it's only recommended. A second example, when doing so, it's going to get you to harm. So we said before, if there's no harm, do the work. What if there's harm? For example, I know if I say something, I can get beaten up, I can get to jail, I can get, something could happen to me. Here the ulama say it's not fard ayn, it's only mustahab. Because not everyone has the ability to stand in front of that. So some of the mashayikh and the imam and salihun, they're not worried about that. They'll just say it, or they'll deal with it because they're strong and they're ready to face the backlash, face the harm even physically. And to prove this, Imam Qurtubi writes in his tafsir, volume 14, page 68, under the tafsir, وَاصْبِرْ عَلَى مَا أَصَابَكَ. Luqman alayhi salam told his son, be patient upon that which will afflict you. He says, if someone is commanding or changing the evil, which will lead to darar or adha, the ahyanan, he will get harmed at times and some kind of harm, then it's recommended to his best of his ability. وَالْقُوةُ فِي ذَاتِ اللَّهِ. And the strength is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because in the situation when if I'm going to say something, I'm going to get beaten. Even the ulama generally don't recommend it, but it's still recommended for those who are able. That's why if you read any of the fiqh manuals and manhaj, books of manhaj, they always say, we command the good, enjoin the good and prohibit the evil, as long as there's no fear of the stick or the sword. It's very important. You don't just go on and you get yourself killed or beaten. But some people on body is strong, or the imam or someone has knowledge and he stand up for it, then it's mustahab. But even in the case, if it's real fear, for example, even him it's still recommended, and sometimes it's not allowed. Because the ulama also mention a situation where you know that you're going to get killed, you actually will. Then you don't say anything, you hate it with your heart. If you know you can say something with your tongue, you say it, but even then then you leave it. Because the situations can change. And the reason why we need to know all of this is that if you just take it, enjoying the good and prohibiting evil to be generally good, you may end up in with problems. With that being said, the Shaykh then telling us that ordering good and prohibiting evil is either fard ayn or fard kifaya, and he gave us the conditions. The question now is, what qualities does the person doing the action need? It's very important. What shurut do I have to fulfill before I engage? So here the Mashayikh, they mentioned there are many shurut. One of them, I'll mention six. 6 things you need to come with before you get started. 6 conditions. Because these conditions will make sure that you're ready. Number 1, you have to be mukallaf, yani legally responsible. Taklif, you have to have legal responsibility. You're a Muslim who is legally responsible. Alright, so you're actually above the age of puberty, you're responsible for the sharia, etc. To practice the deen. Legally responsible. Number 2, you have to be Muslim. Islam. Because if you want the good deeds from this action, you have to be a Muslim. I mean, hypothetically speaking, a non-Muslim can do the action, but they're not going to seek the reward. And that's what some scholars say, the non-Muslim is not expected from him, nor anticipated from him that he does that. Because first of all, does he know ma'ruf and munkar? So Islam. Number 3, ikhlas, sincerity. And this is very important. You have to be sincere. You're not trying to gain some kind of status out of this. Because truth be told, it's not easy. Number 4, you have to be following the sunnah. Yani somebody who is following the sunnah Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That means they know what they're doing. And they're actually going to follow the sunnah of doing it. Number 5, you have to have ilm. We spoke about this already, some knowledge. How much knowledge? As we'll see, you don't have to be perfect. You have to know as much about what you're doing. So you know this is haram, this is recommended. If someone asks me why, I can explain a little bit, because the ilm is sufficient. You don't have to be alim, you don't have to be a scholar, right? And you don't have to know everything, within the scope of what you're dealing with. And number 6, qudra, ability. If you don't have ability, then you can't do it. This is important. Ability means able to go and do this action. So these are conditions. And a lot of this is mentioned from an excellent book called Enjoying the Good and Prohibiting the Evil by the Saudi Sheikh Khalid As-Sabt. It's a very good book. He gathers all these issues and conditions, bi-adillah, very, very detailed. Page 170, 190, he talks about the conditions. So once we meet these conditions now, you still need to have something else, which are adab. Because it's not just about conditions. Now the adab. This is etiquette class, right? You have to know etiquette. So if you meet all the conditions now, how will you do it? So this is important. The Shaykh is telling us a little bit already. But before we get more into his lines, the ulama mentioned another set of etiquette that you need. Obligatory etiquette and recommended. We'll just talk about that obligatory etiquette. So if you're going to prohibit any evil or enjoying good, first you have to have leniency, rifq. That's probably number 1 and probably the most, sometimes people complain most about. No rifq. You're harsh. If you're harsh, you're not going to anticipate someone will listen to you. You're going to anticipate more backlash. Because a lot of times we can't control the outcome of somebody, a reaction. But you can control your approach. In Allah ar-rafiqun yuhibbur rifq. Allah is all lenient and kind. He loves kindness and leniency. But the problem sometimes you find is when you want to tell someone to stay from something, you may be angry for Allah's sake. And then because of that, you may end up throwing the anger on them. But rifq, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the best mu'allim. Right? Hadith Sahih Muslim. When the Sahabi, I believe it was Muawiyah ibn Hakam, when he came to the Salah and he made the mistakes. He didn't know you can't speak in Salah. He didn't know these things. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, I never different. He told someone once, different time. The second time maybe it's different. Second one, if you really want to start with yourself. I know I meant to begin with yourself. Which means, if you're going to prohibit the evil and join the good, start with yourself. You don't want to be somebody telling people to pray. You should be starting with yourself. Save yourself first. So a lot of times you can command the good and prohibit the evil, just do it yourself. Look at your family, for example. If they see you praying salah, it's sufficient evidence. Before you tell them, guys, let's pray. Did you pray? And if you pray in front of them, they get the message. He's not just telling us. It's very important. Allah says in Surah Taha, وَأْمُرْ أَهْلَكَ بِالصَّلَاةِ وَاسْتَبْرِ عَلَيْهَا وَأْمُرْ أَهْلَكَ بِالصَّلَاةِ. Command your family to pray. In the tafsir, it's mentioned. Enjoying this good, more good is going to come out of it. If people listen to me, I have to say it. But don't be considering so much, nothing is done. That's not what's intended. You say, oh, we don't know. No, we have to say something. We have to do something, but we have to think about it. And in every situation, dictates a different kind of response. So for example, always you ask about the person. Before you talk to them, always you take for default setting, treat people as if they're ignorant and they don't know any better. That's the origin. If you know this person is more knowledgeable, okay, now I have to take them aside and tell them more sternly, you know better. But now, many times we notice that we don't think about, am I pushing them away from the deen? Family especially. Some of you turn others away from the deen, Allah Rasul said. So for example, at home, how do you wake people up for salah? You're playing other things, and a lot of times they're not praying salah. He said, Ibn Qayyim, if you know when you go and you prohibit them, and you don't have fiqh and basira, no insight, no understanding, and you prohibit them that without putting them to go towards something better. And you tell them, guys, why are you playing this? Come, let's ride some horse. Let's horse race. Horse racing is good in Islam, it's healthy exercise. He says, if you know that you can't do that, then it will be foolish just to tell them not to do it. You see, if you're not going to change it from one thing to another, there's no benefit. Because you know people are not going to just go from zero to nothing. You tell them, don't play this game. What should I do? Just don't do anything. He said, that's not basir and fiqh. Then he gave another example of somebody reading books, just regular books. But if you know, you tell them, stop wasting time with those, let's say, dunya books. And they might read books of dalala, misguidance or innovation. He says, not fiqh, to tell them not to read it anymore. Stop reading. Those non-beneficial books. And gives now the example of his teacher, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. We probably heard the story before. One day he said that we were with Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, me and some of our companions, at the time of the Tatar, the Mongols. And he said we passed by them drinking alcohol, and one of us went to prohibit them, Ibn Taymiyyah told us not to do that. And he said because when they are intoxicated, we know it's haram to intoxicate because it stops you from the dhikrullah and from salah, Allah says. He said, when these people are intoxicated, they don't kill the Muslims and take them captives. So let them do what they're doing. He said, that's the fiqh, that was the basira Ibn Taymiyyah versus us. We're just looking at the action, he's looking at the big situation. And it's true, because that time before the Muslims expelled the Mongols from Sham, they were wreaking havoc on the Muslim land. So this is the kind of basira we need. At home, we need to think deeply. What if I tell my child or tell my friend, my brother, don't play this, don't do that, what am I going to substitute it with? In Iqtida Sirat al-Mustaqim, Ibn Taymiyyah mentions something beautiful. He says, because the nufus, the souls, they don't go from one thing except to another thing. It's beautiful. You don't go from nothing, something to nothing. He said, you usually go from something to something else. So that's another benefit. Always have a substitute. If your child is playing, for example, too much games, video games, you don't like it, it's not the best for them, give them some recreation, activity outside to play sports. Make something alternative. You need a badil. You can't just say, don't play this, and just sit at home. And sometimes we forget that. Someone who listens to music, teach them Quran, teach them a beautiful station of Quran, it will change. For example, if they always listen to some music, give them an app, give them some qari, beautiful voice, watch, tomorrow you're going to forget that music and listen to that. But if you tell them, don't listen to music and no Quran, what are they going to listen to? And sometimes this is the big problem. As us, we need to think. And one more benefit and story we mentioned, before we get back to the next line. Sometimes when you're enjoying the good and prohibiting evil, you have to know that people are not going to give you an easy time. Because if you know a lot of people, some people might get angry at you and just cut you off. So you have to know from the beginning, if I'm prepared to enjoy the good and prohibit evil, I have to be ready to lose some kind of, maybe friends, maybe. And I'll give you a qissa. One of the ulama, Ibn Qawwi, his name is. He has a kitab, Ma'alim al-Qurba fi Talab al-Hisbah. He mentions the qissa, a very funny one. He says that there used to be a man who used to go to the butcher every day to get some meat to feed his cat. So the man has a cat, then he used to go to the butcher. One day he went to tell the butcher something that he's doing is haram. And he knows that if you go to the butcher and say, you're doing something haram, the butcher's not going to give you the meat. So when he realized this, he went and he told him. Before he went to the butcher, he freed the cat from his house. When he told the butcher, stop doing what you're doing, the butcher said, you know what, you're not going to get any meat from me anymore. He said, it's okay, I already freed the cat. I knew that's going to happen. This is the point. You have to lighten the load. People enjoying the good and evil, they don't have too many friend circles. This is the point some mashayikh say. They're not connected to everybody. Because they know some people, they're going to turn against them. Some of the biggest problems you find online today, when you know everybody, you can't say anything. Because everybody's watching you. Wallahi, ikhwan. Now if we look online, you notice. Because we know everybody, we're so careful with our words, we can't say anything. But when you don't know so little people and you're not worried if you lose, this is the person who's sincere, is focusing on Allah. That's actually from adab. And the last point I want to mention, the ulama, when they talk about enjoying the good and prohibiting evil, in reality, it's such a deep science that people, they study this before they join the groups called Hisbah. Hisbah are the jama'ah who goes around and enjoying the good and prohibiting evil. Hayya Amr bin Auf and Hayya Munkar in Saudi, for example. It's a jama'ah educated, who learn. There's a job. And that's the point we're going to get to next. The Shaykh now, after he told us what's the ruling, he says in line number 19, وَلَوْ كَانَ ذَا فِسْقٍ وَجَاهِلٍ وَفِي سِوَى الَّذِي قِيلَ فَرْضٌ بِالْكِفَايَةِ وَحْدُودِ. He says, if the one enjoying the good and prohibiting evil is a fasiq themselves, or ignorant themselves, and there are other people doing the work, then it's only a communal obligation to determine it this way. What is he saying here? If you yourself are wicked, you have mistakes, you're doing, let's say, some sins, hidden or public, or you're ignorant, you're not knowledgeable, and other people doing the work, it's only recommended for you. Because we said before, it's fard kifaya. The question now comes, what if I'm ignorant about some things, but I know some things? What if I'm doing the same thing I'm telling people not to do? Can I engage? The ulama say yes. Because Shaykh Salih Fawzan, he says, you don't have to be 100% in order to enjoy the good and prohibit. You don't have to be a perfect person. No. Even if you're ignorant of something, but you know what you're talking about here, then do your part. And the same is true for someone who's a fasiq. Maybe they're struggling with some sin openly. Because if it's hidden, we all have hidden sins we try to avoid. But publicly, or you're doing something which is considered major sin, that doesn't stop you from doing the task. And I'm going to give you now a point which is very important. Some people misunderstood inside the ayah, أَتَأْمُرُونَ النَّاسِ بِالْبِرِّ وَتَنْسَوْنَ أَنفُسَكُمْ. Some people misunderstand this verse. Allah says, do you command the people good and righteousness, and you forget yourself? So here, the ayah, Imam Qurtubi and Ibn Kathir, they say it doesn't mean the verse. Don't do the enjoining. What they say it means, وَلَيْسَ مُرَادِ, they say, ذَمُّهُمْ عَلَى أَمْرِهِمْ الْبِرِّ مَعَ تَرْكِهِمْ لَهُ بَلْ عَلَى تَرْكِهِمْ لَهُ. The ayah is telling them, not prohibiting them or punishing them for doing the job, it's because they didn't fulfill their part. They didn't do it themselves. The verse is criticizing people who enjoy the good and prohibit it, but do not help themselves to. Not that if you're in the state, don't do it. You see a difference? If you still, let's say somebody, for example, has a problem with cigarettes, they're smoking. And they know it's bad and they're struggling. They can still tell everyone not to smoke. It's still allowed. And what you don't realize, by doing that, it might encourage you to stop. Because one thing that we all human beings don't like is being a hypocrite. No one likes it. And everyone is scared of it. So sometimes by telling people not to do it, you feel like, how can I face myself in the mirror doing that? I have to stop now too. But when you don't tell people to do it, and you yourself are doing it, what happens? It's very less likely you're going to stop. It's very important. This is an important benefit, because if you tell yourself, I have to be perfect, no one will enjoy the good. No one will prohibit the evil. Because who doesn't have sin here? Imam Nawawi, he writes, the ulama said it's not a condition to enjoy the good and prohibit the evil, that you have to be kamil hal, a perfect situation, a perfect individual, متمثلا بأمر ما به مجتنب ما نهى عنه. No one said that. You have to be perfect, doing everything you're told to do, stay from everything you have to stay away from. No. And so this is a shubha that shaitan he brings to the people. So when, for example, you're telling your friend something, the shaitan will come to you and say, and look at you, you're a hypocrite. And then you'll say, you know what, you're right. So your friend doesn't benefit and you don't benefit. But some situation may come that you do go and tell the person, they listen, and then they come around and tell you not to do it. Allahumma barak, two of you now are going to become better. It's very important we don't fall for that. And the Shaykh is telling us in line number 19, ignorant or wicked doesn't prevent you from doing the task. Now a question comes, and this is a very important question we need to answer, is that it has to do with ordering the good and prohibiting the evil. How can we do this in Islam when people have personal freedoms? This is a shubha that a lot of people have in this society. Commanding the good and enjoying the good and prohibiting evil interferes with my hurriyat al-shakhsiyya, my personal freedom. People in this society, all across the world, Muslim world now too, it's growing this idea, I'm free to do whatever I want. Who are you to tell me what to do? So some people say, well, here you are. I'm telling you to pray for your own benefit. And they say, I don't want to pray. It's my business. So the question, how can we reconcile this act of enjoying the good, prohibiting evil, which is so much benefit, with somebody's personal freedom, which is their right to sin and to do right. Sure, Allah will test you, but what about me to do my task? So how do we answer this? Because this is a big doubt they have, people nowadays. And this is one of the most common doubts. I'm free, leave me alone, let me do what I want. In home, in public. And what happens then is they try to diminish people from enjoying the good, prohibiting evil. So the way we respond to this is two ways. First response, doing the good, enjoying the good and prohibiting the evil has benefit. Not enjoying the good and not prohibiting the evil has harms. If we all stop now telling people what to do, it has spiritual harms and physical harms to society. Very important. Spiritual, Islamically, we know if we all stop enjoying the good and prohibiting the evil, spiritual harms, i.e., Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will punish all of us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may not accept any one of our du'as. It comes in a hadith about this. But also it has harms physically for the community. So the question now we say then, if there's harms are produced by not enjoying the good and prohibiting the evil, and the person who's doing whatever they want harming themselves, we tell them, us not enjoying the good and prohibiting the evil harms everybody. So you're not only harming yourself, you're harming us too. By us not telling you to stop doing the haram, you're harming all of us. And the benefit we take, in society, they run the world around a harm principle, right? The principle called the harm principle. What is this principle? Do whatever you want as long as you don't harm others. Right? Everyone probably heard this. This is the world's most commonly cited principle. Most people live by this. I can do whatever I want as long as I don't harm you. We tell you doing the haram and not telling you, it's harming me and you. It's actually harming all of us. And what's the proof? He said, physically, when haram is being done and no one's prohibiting it, it encourages more haram. Someone is selling drugs, for example, and no one stops it, more drugs are sold. It harms me, all of us. Second, spiritually, we're all in it. For a Muslim, we believe Allah gets angry when this happens. So, the first benefit, the harm principle says, you can only do whatever you want as long as you don't harm others. You're harming us by me not stopping you. So the first thing, you're not actually off the hook. And that's one of the biggest problems. Your freedom stops when you harm others. You doing haram harms us all. Therefore, I have to tell you to stop. So that's the answer. And we know from the Sharia, anytime haram is happening, even amongst good people, and no one is stopping it, we're all liable to trouble. Second answer, which is an aqli answer, right, the more logical, rational one. And this one is Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah hints to in his kitab, Enjoying the Good and Forbidding Evil. It's in English too. You see that book is very, very good. Enjoying the Good and Forbidding the Evil, Ibn Taymiyyah, Shaykh al-Islam, page 36 to 37. In English, go to this book. So Ibn Taymiyyah, what does he say in summary? Those people who are doing bad, who engage in bad, don't they want other people to do bad too? Yeah, right? Those who do bad. It's not just like they're doing bad by themselves. They're not just drinking alcohol in their basement. They're in the public. In fact, they want you to do it too. If you look at them, in fact, they spread the evil and they encourage it. And if you sat with them, they want you to engage in it too. And just as Allah says, that those people who disbelieve, they wish that you would disbelieve. كَمَا كَفَرُوا فَتَكُونُوا سَوَاءً. Those disbelieve want you to disbelieve, you're all the same. Look at Ibn Taymiyyah saying here. Then he quotes here, he says, Shaykh al-Islam mentions this verse, and he says, Uthman ibn Affan has described to him that he said, that any woman who does fawahish, adultery, she too wants other women to do adultery. So what's Ibn Taymiyyah's argument? Just like the bad person who does bad, not only doing bad by himself quietly, he tells people to do it, he encourages it. Why is it fair for them to encourage evil, not us to prohibit it? When you sit with you listen to music, do haram, you want me to do it too. In fact, if you notice, they're the ones spreading it. So why is it fair that you can spread it freely, and I can't prohibit you freely? I'm spreading the opposite. And therefore, Ibn Taymiyyah says, you'll notice that they wish you partake in the sin just like they're doing it. So it's very interesting, you want to do something, and you want others not to do it. Where is the freedom in you just doing it by yourself and not encouraging others? And wallahi, if you notice, anyone who's into something wrong, you see them teaching other people, showing them, sharing it. And then when you come to tell you, leave me alone, I have freedom. You didn't have freedom when you were telling me to come listen. When I sit in the table, there's no freedom. Taymiyyah says even they're taught to force you to drink sometimes. And this exactly shows you, if it's allowed for you, it's allowed for us. And for Sharia, bibab al-awla. We have more right than you don't have right. So this is important. This is actually something we notice. And notice amongst people around you, when they're doing wrong things, they are not hesitant to share with you. But when you start trying to prohibit them, they have to get upset. And when you get upset when they're prohibited, they say, well, come on, man, this is wrong. So we see from even that angle, personal freedoms can never come away of the Sharia of Allah. We're all servants of Allah, and we all have to follow the Sharia. So therefore, anyone who does something haram is harming himself and others. It's very important, and therefore, we have to enjoin the good, and we have to prohibit evil for their benefit and ours. Inshallah, it becomes clear, because that shubha is not, in reality, anything more than somebody trying to beautify the wrong and prohibit the right. So with all this being said now, line 20 to 22 now, the author, he gets into the ulama now, the scholars and their role. قال المؤلف والعلماء يختص بما يختص علمه بهم وبمن يستنصرون به قدي. He said it's specific to enjoin the good and prohibit evil upon the scholars in accordance to what Allah specified in knowledge. Ulama, they have a lot of knowledge, they have to participate more. Right? They're more liable than anyone. And those who aid them in the action in accordance to their ability. So two people then, ulama and authorized. The ulama, they don't only prohibit evil and enjoying good by themselves. There are people who support them, like the people who the government has supported or given them strength and authority, or anyone who can aid in acting their knowledge. So here, the first benefit we take, scholars are liable to enjoin the good and prohibit the evil. And the question is, are the scholars doing their task? Yes. They speak, they write, they author, they advise. And those around them who participate alongside with them, they are also doing their job. So for example, the government in Islamic world, in past and present, there's a group called the Hisba. Hisba is an organized community or people whose job is to keep the command, enjoin the good and prohibit the evil. You can call them moral police. Now somebody may ask the question, brother, what moral police? What is this abuse of rights? You guys know in this city here, Toronto, there used to be moral police in the 50s. Go, you can Google it. They dismantled them. They used to exist in this city too. Stopping people from drinking, men and women mixing. Wallahi, you read it. The article I read on this. In this country, when men and women flirting, the police used to come by and say, get lost from here. People drinking, men wandering the streets. That used to be something here. But they lost it because our society changed. But back home, it's still going. But some people, because they don't read and they don't study, I think, why in the Muslim world there's a police telling me to pray? As if they didn't exist anywhere else in the world. A lot of times the people who are often worried about the Islamic issues, they're the least likely to even know what they're talking about. So why does moral police exist? Because their job is to enact the khair. And someone would say, why can't everyone do what they want? Allah says in the Quran that one of the rules of the government is what? What's one of the jobs of the Muslim ruler? He has to enjoin the good and prohibit evil. It's in the Quran. If you become a ruler, one of your job is to do that. So imagine, you want to pass the test in front of Allah Yawm al-Qiyamah as a ruler, you have to do your job, so people can't stop you. So some people say, why is the ruler interfering in my life? Allah told them that's one of the jobs of the rulers in the Quran. So with that being said, the ulama, they have to partake. And the proof is in the Quran, chapter 5, Surah Ma'idah, verse 63. Allah says, why do not the rabbis and the religious learned men forbid them from uttering sinful words and eating or consuming illegal things? Evil is indeed that which they have been performing. So here Allah criticized the Ahbar and the Rabbaniyun, the rabbis at the time of Bani Israel and the learned men who didn't stop the people from saying bad things and consuming suht, illegal wealth. What bad things they used to do. Means the ulama, they have to participate. Second, the ulama are the ones who are responsible for educating the people. So if people don't know something's wrong, who's liable? Learn it amongst us. So all of us here, if we sit back and something's happening and all of us, we know it's wrong, first question is, where are the people who know something? How come you didn't stop them? Hadith Sahih Bukhari Muslim, Muawiyah bin Abi Sufyan radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, one day in Hajj season he got up on the minbar and he had a piece of fake hair in his hand. And he said, oh people of Medina, where are your scholars? Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam prohibited this. Women wearing fake hair. So he had some in his hand and he said, where are the scholars? Why is it just in scholars? Because their job is to tell people not to do these things. So he told them, the Prophet prohibited this. Behind the comments Fath al-Bari, he said, Aina ulama'ukum, where are your scholars? Because the scholars are the ones who are supposed to prohibit the evil and enjoin the good. So if they didn't know, he educated them and tell the people about this. So when you go to the Muslim world, you may see scholars giving fatwas, writing, gathering, educating. And some people say, why are the ulama always worried about what people are doing? That's their job. That's their job. Just like in our society today, we have politicians, right? And we have community leaders who decide what laws are good or not good. Why do they care about these things? To make sure society is functioning healthy. So important. Some people, you might find them that they're not thinking correct. They're always saying somebody interfering with my affairs. You don't live by yourself. Right? We live in a society collectively. So therefore the ulama are liable, and these are proofs. And the ulama, for the most part, as we look, we see they're doing their tasks. Take a look, research, you find the ulama always are speaking, always writing. That which we don't see, we don't know, but that which we see is much. And so our job is to take that information too and participate by sharing it and trying to enjoy the good. So for example, while we're not ulama, if the ulama are teaching something, we take the ilm, we share with our family and friends to continue the khair going. The author then, he moves to line number 21. And here, he talks about the levels of how to enjoy good and prohibit evil. وَأَضْعَفُهُ بِالْقَلْبِ ثُمَّ لِسَانِهِ وَأَقْوَاهُ إِنْكَارُ الْفَتَى الْجَلْدِ بِالْيَدِ. Prohibit, he says, the weakest form of changing the evil is by the heart, then the tongue, and the strongest form is the rebuke of a young, strong man using his hand. So you have three levels. Making inkar with the heart, rebuking and testing with the heart, the tongue, and the hand. First, the lowest is the heart, then the tongue, then the hand. So now comes a very important question. Where did these three categories come from? Hey, Abu Sa'id Khudri, all of us, many of us we know. Rasulullah said, "Man ra'a minkum munkaran falyughayyirhu biyadihi." Whoever amongst you sees evil, let him change with his hand. And then he says, فَإِن لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ, if he can't do so, فَبِلِسَانِهِ, then with his tongue. فَإِن لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ بِقَلْبِهِ وَذَلِكَ أَضْعَفُ الْإِيمَانِ. And if he can't, then with his heart, and that is the lowest level of Iman. Another hadith says that there is nothing behind that or beyond that of Iman. That's the lowest. So number one, detesting something with your heart, this is wajib in all times, all places. You never excuse. You always have to hate the harm or wrong in your heart. Always. Even if you can't change it, you have to hate it. That one never changes. It's always in the heart. Either you see it or you heard it. Or you witnessed it on, someone wrote about it, or you saw a video. Anywhere, anytime something evil happens, you have to hate it with your heart. And this is important because if you like the harm or the evil that's being done, even if you didn't see it, you're also liable. It's a two-way street. Just like you have to hate it when you saw it, you can't do anything about it, and you're not held accountable, inshallah, because you couldn't do more. If you didn't see it and you like it, you're also liable. You get sin. So for example, one hadith says, if some evil's happening across the world and you like it and you're pleased with it, you're also liable and sinful. That's the worst case. You didn't even see it. You're not even there and you're getting sin. So one of the things, always in your heart, you have to hate it. So there's no dispute there. But the second one, the third one, is conditional. So when do you have to speak out against something? You have to speak out when you see it, or you hear it, or you heard about it. So you see it, or you heard about it. For example, someone told you something's wrong, you talk about it. Try to encourage against that. You saw yourself, and you're able to say something, you say it. And here, it's important to know that if you're able. So for example, if you see someone do something wrong, but I can't say anything because I'm going to get repercussions, I'm going to get beaten, I can't speak, I have to hate it. And I have to go get somebody who can help. So how do you detest it with your tongue? You can remind the person, you can threaten them to get authority, you can rebuke them. These are all means. And today's time, we can add to the tongue writing. You can write about it. For example, something happened, you write about it. Rasulullah ﷺ also took into consideration people's feelings. So for example, if you see someone do something wrong, you tell the person, don't do it. But what if you saw someone do something wrong and he wanted to tell everybody a message? He would give a public address and he wouldn't mention their name because he wanted to teach them not to do that action. So sometimes you can address someone specifically, other times generally. What's the matter with certain people? If I don't know, they do such and such. That's how Rasulullah spoke. What's wrong with certain people? Because maybe the person who didn't know was wrong or he made a mistake is different. But versus someone who's deliberately doing something, I have to go and tell everybody, this guy is doing this. Sometimes you see the scholars and people write about names. Why? Because there's a public benefit. But you have to have fiqh, right? You can't just, someone says something, you just blast them. This is one of the problems we have in our society. There's no concern, just attacking everybody the same. Number 3 is the hand, and it's the most restricted. You can use force if you have an authority. That's it. What does authority mean? In your home, you're the head of the house, have authority. The government, they have authority. Ulama, they have authority. Hisbah, the people whose job is this, they have authority. No authority, don't use your hand. So for example, you go to public, you see something wrong, you don't just go and take something in your hand. One of the worst cases you may find somebody, sees something wrong, he's trying to change it with his hands. Who authorized you to do that? Because there's fiqh behind it now. You authorized to do something. What if you go, for example, you go to a shop, they have haram there, you go and you break it, you break the whole shop. Who's going to pay back the whole shop? You're only liable to do the things evil, not the rest. So you see, this is one of the problems. Most people, you see them using their hand without any authorization, that's extreme behavior. Because you have to first have the authority. And if you don't have it, you may seek the authority. Go to somebody else's house, let's say something bad is happening. What do? You tell the head of the household, this is wrong. Maybe, and tell him privately and he'll change it. You don't come to his house and start touching his things. And this is important because you might find sometimes those who fall more into the extreme, they're using their hands, breaking things in public. And we're going to get to that later. When there's public fasad, you can't go around just doing that. Now, with this being said, the ulama mentioned the heart, you have to always detest it. But the other two are conditional to what we mentioned earlier. You have the ability, knowledge, all these things, no repercussions, etc. And sometimes they can be left off. Right? Some situations may lead you not to prohibiting the evil and enjoying the good with your tongue or your hand. Sometimes that's what's going to happen. I'll give you now two scenarios where things become bad, you can only hear your heart. It's very difficult to do more. One example is when at the end of times, see, like nowadays, how many of us when we go down the road, we prohibit everything? I'm sure most of us don't do that, right? You're just driving down the road, open the window, yelling at everybody who's doing haram. Anyone does this? Anywhere they go, they say, you're not wearing the hijab, you're not doing this, we don't. Why? You have to ask yourself, why are we exempted? Because at the end of times, the fasad is too much. والدليل ذلك حديث عبد الله بن عمرو العاص في صحيح أبي داود. Rasul said at the end of times, things will become very bad. And then they asked him, what should we do? He said, إلزم بيتك, stay in your homes, واملك عليك لسانك, hold back your tongue, وخذ بما تعرف, and take that which you know, ودع ما تنكر, and leave off that which you don't know, or that which is evil, وعليك بأمر خاصة نفسك, ودع عنك أمر عامة. Very clear. Worry about what's beneficial for you, leave off the public affairs. Where does this hadith fit into everything? There's too much evil. It's end of times. You see, so this can excuse sometimes when we cannot change everything. It doesn't mean don't do anything, but it means I can't change everything, so I do what I can. For example, I see some people, I try to encourage them. I see some wrong, but I'm not going to be liable every time I can't. What did it also? قال الله تعالى عليكم بأنفسكم عليكم أنفسكم. O you who believe, upon your own self. This ayah, we know Surah Ma'idah, some people misunderstood it. What does it mean, alaykum anfusakum? Imam Tabari says some of the Salaf, they held this to mean at the end of times, when there's no more wrong or too much wrong, doesn't harm you. When they're misguided, you're guided, there's no more harm. At the end of times, it's very difficult. Today we notice that, even in Muslim countries. Very difficult. So here, these ayat can come, and these ahadith can come in practice. In the sense that you do as much as you can, but you're not liable for everything you see. This is important because the second point I want to mention, the ulama have khilaf then, which is that at the end of times we can understand too much evil, not enough ability to change everything, but doesn't mean you still don't do your part. So you do your best you can, but you're not held accountable for every single instance. Second example would be when there's somebody or people who if you tell them to stop doing something, they're not going to listen. The ulama have khilaf on this. For example, there's someone who you told them maybe or you didn't tell them, not to do something, and you have a good feeling, if I told them, they're not going to listen. Do I have to tell them? Here the ulama have two opinions. One group says still you have to tell them. Where other scholars said you don't have to. If they're not going to listen, means you either tried before or you know this person very well, that you're not held accountable and you leave them. And while this is a difference of opinion scholars they have here, it does apply to a certain degree to the wider societies when people are doing a lot of bad, and you cannot necessarily expect everybody to change. I'll just mention one interesting thing that Imam here, Ibn Abdul Salam, he mentions Qawaid al-Ahkam. He says something interesting. He says that Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he used to pray in Masjid Haram in Mecca. وَفِيهِ أَنصَابُ الْأَوْثَانِ, and there was idols and there was altars for other than Allah. وَلَمْ يَنْكِرْ ذَلِكَ كُلَّمَا رَآهُ, and he never prohibited them every time he saw them doing it. And likewise, he saw the mushrikeen doing bad things and never prohibited every time. Likewise, the Salaf, they saw a lot of the oppressors and a lot of the wicked in their time period, and they didn't prohibit them every time they saw them doing something wrong. And he continues to explain why, because they know in general some things have been said and some things can't be said. You told the person, maybe they didn't listen. Or you're yourself doing your task, you prohibit some, did not others. So we can see from this angle, some of the scholars say this case, while you still have to do your best, you're not liable for all of it. And I'm saying this because there's some young Muslims, when they hear enjoying the good prohibiting evil, they go on the market and they want to change everything. What happens? They create fasad is even worse. Munkar bigger than that. And what happens? They say the ummah is finished, the time is over, we have to do something, destroying things, yelling at people, harming. What happens? Instead of bringing khair, people run away from deed more. Rather, what they should understand, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that moment, that time in Mecca, he did his part, and other times, what was not outside of his ability, he was not able to do it. We said that you have to have ability, and that's the point I wanted to highlight. Added to this, a very interesting point, we all know when you're prohibiting the evil, you also have to know what you're doing. So the ulama say, what does that mean? It means, number one, you have to know something's evil. And a good question that comes up, what if it's something that ulama have difference of opinion on? This is an interesting one. What if some evils there, it's mukhtalaf, and the ulama differed. Can I prohibit someone based on my view versus your view? Some scholars say that if something which is difference of opinion on, which is a considerable difference of opinion, not a weak